Attention! This makes absolutely no sense. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Zander's Facts.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into the latest edition of the Zander's Facts podcast. I am, of course, the aforementioned Zander. It is Wednesday, May 31st, the final day of May in 2023, and it is episode 107 of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. We have got a ton of facts to get to you this week because, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you all know this, but the end of the NBA season is nigh. Because the NBA Finals start on Thursday, tomorrow, the day after this podcast comes out. So I brought on my Zander's Facts NBA analyst Hillbilly, because we recapped everything that's gone on in the NBA playoffs so far. We previewed the finals. Oh yeah, we had a lot of facts to talk about. So I'm just going to get straight to them. But before we do, I just wanted to remind you all that if you like the Zander's Facts podcast, if you think you're going to like all the facts on this week's edition, remember to follow the podcast, download this episode, rate and review the podcast. Check us out on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at Zander's Facts, that is Zander with a Z. And most importantly, remember to tell all your friends, we like to call it around here, spread the facts. Zander's Facts Podcast. Tell all your friends about the podcast, about the newsletter, Zander's Weekend Facts. It comes out every Sunday morning. It's a recap of the week's top headlines. Check it out. And then we've also got the Zander's Facts link tree that has all these Zander's Facts links that you need. Episode 107 is a NBA Finals preview. Denver Nuggets, Miami Heat. Oh my gosh, you all don't need the perspective of a Celtics fan, Bill Simmons, okay? We need the perspective of a Giannis fan, as in Hillbilly, and a Heat fan, as in Zander. And that's what we brought to you all on this week's pretty fact-filled podcast, y'all. There's a lot of facts, and also, I mean, listen, at the end, we make our predictions for the finals, so you're not going to want to miss it, but also, at the very end of this podcast, they make a special announcement about next week's podcast, which is episode 108, that is coming out next week, but it's not coming out on Wednesday of next week. So if you want to know when it's coming out next week, stay till the end of the podcast because I announce when it is coming out next week. And it's going to have a lot of facts, so you're not going to want to miss it. So stay till the very end because we got a lot of big facts. But you know what? We got a lot of facts on this week's podcast. So let's get straight to it. Let's get to our Zander's Facts NBA Finals preview in 2023 with our Zander's Facts NBA analyst Hillbilly. That is next as the Zander's Facts podcast continues.
Zander's Facts.
All right, welcome back. Zander's Facts, episode 107. We are feeling pretty good on this podcast, aren't we, Hillbilly? Pretty good.
It's nice to be here with the Heat's newest fan.
You're spreading lies.
Well, no, yeah, that was a couple weeks ago. After
at what point did you become a fan again?
After they beat the Bucks.
Oh, okay. I thought that it was tentative at that point.
No, after they beat the Bucks, I was all in, let me tell you. It was tentative when I was before the series. But first off, I've always been a Heat fan. Deep down, I just had to go down there and find my fandom. And you know what I did? So, there you go.
What are you talking about?
You found it somewhere deep down in the Heat culture.
That's right.
Found your fandom once again.
Yes, indeed.
Well, Heat culture is alive and well, and it's going to be fun to talk about.
Let me tell you, the Miami Heat are the NBA Finals, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if y'all watched that game Monday night against the Boston Celtics, Game 7. We're going to talk about it, though. It was pretty good. Heat represent the East in the finals, but we've also got the Denver Nuggets coming out of the West into the finals. And so the NBA playoffs, they've lasted for a month and a half now, and we're finally getting to the final round between the Heat and the Nuggets. The playoffs, I thought, have been great so far. I think you would absolutely agree with me, Hillbilly. All 3 rounds, we've had exciting storylines, entertaining matchups, great games. Now we're down to the final 2, the Nuggets and the Heat. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to preview the finals, but we're also going to do a little recap of what's happened so far in the NBA playoffs. And for that, we're going to start in the Western Conference on the left side of the bracket. If you look at the bracket, the Western Conference is on the left side. So we're going to start with the left side, and we're going to talk about the Western Conference Finals a lot and the two teams. And one of those teams was obviously the Denver Nuggets. But the team we're going to start with, Hillbilly, was the Los Angeles Lakers. ESPN was they like talking about the Los Angeles Lakers after the Nuggets swept them. Yeah. Because obviously they have LeBron James. And LeBron James decided to make some noise, Hillbilly, after Game 4.
Immediately after getting his butt kicked, he could not let Denver have the spotlight for a single second because that is LeBron James. And he did some nonsense talk that not a single person on earth believed, where he said he was contemplating retirement. We know that when LeBron James retires, it's going to be like a 3-year saga of him doing victory laps around every stadium or every arena in the league just to make sure that it is the most celebrated event in sports history. There's no way he goes out like this. Plus the fact that he's actually still playing pretty well.
Mm-hmm. You thought Coach K's year was bad.
Not even close. Not even close.
But besides all that, let's talk about how they got to the Western Conference Finals, Hillbilly. They had that first round series that we did talk about on this podcast against the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies definitely flamed out. The Lakers totally dominated them in most of those games. Of course, we now know that some of the players on the Grizzlies may have been otherwise occupied, as you would like to put.
Yeah. Ja Morant obviously kind of didn't have his head in it. His numbers were okay, but he's the leader of the team. And when the leader of the team is that distracted, they just kind of fell apart. I mean, they shot 40.2%, not 42%, which would have been horrible. They shot 40.2%, which is ghastly, even more horrible.
Yikes!
I mean, that's just awful for a team with that much offensive firepower to do that poorly. I mean, the Lakers defense is legit. It was up until the Nuggets beat them. The Lakers had the best defense in the playoffs and were really cooking. But still, that was a really poor performance from the Grizzlies. And what a turn for Grizzly fans. Halfway through the season, you had to just be completely excited. Maybe Grizzly fans had the most reason to be excited about the future than anyone else in the league. Just an incredibly young team, all their draft picks still, young stars coming into their own, already overachieving. I think they were second in the West for most of the year, if they didn't dip into first for a little while. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to fall apart with Ja Morant, and it just bled right through to the playoffs. And they could not have picked a worse opponent in a veteran, tested, steady team like the Lakers to just completely take advantage of the turmoil. And that's how you wind up shooting 40% in the playoffs.
It was rough. Then the Lakers, after they took care of the Grizzlies, went to Golden State, took on the defending champion Warriors in what I thought was going to be another 7-game series. The Warriors, we talked about their series with the Kings, and how the Kings made this grand return to the playoffs after, what was it, the longest playoff drought in the top 4 sports in North America active. And they come back, and they have that 7-game series, and Steph Curry really, was playing. What did you say, Hillbilly? You said he was playing the best of his career, I believe.
Yeah, he was. Well, I think he was. I think he was shouldering the entire load.
And then they run into the Lakers. Curry played fine, I thought, but it's just the players around Steph Curry weren't up to the task.
Yeah, it was surprising to hear today that their general manager is leaving, Bob Myers, who is he's on the very short list of the greatest general managers in the sport. I mean, he's tied for first with a bunch of, a couple, not a bunch, but a couple of other general managers. And for him to leave, he's only 48 years old. So it's not like he's retiring. He's going somewhere else, obviously. I think that the writing's on the wall right now for the Warriors that they are probably going to have to take it apart.
So sad.
And they're paying a lot of money for players that aren't producing anymore. I mean, Klay Thompson, it's sad to see. I mean, I guess it's hard to feel too sorry for him, but but he has fallen off a cliff. In that series against the Lakers, he only shot 38% from the field. We just got done talking about how bad 40% was. And 38% is just abysmal. And his defense has also suffered a lot recently. So he's not out there for his defense anymore. He can't play offense. And they have a lot of money tied up into him and Jordan Poole, who, Jordan Poole plays no defense. So if he is not providing a lot of offensive firepower, then he is just a waste of space out there. And he only shot 25% from three, which is, again, really, that's Giannis like numbers. Oh. Like if Giannis probably, I haven't looked at it, but he probably shot around 25% from three. That's that bad. And then Draymond is, I know, but from the eye test, he showed better than this, but he did have the worst plus minus in the series. And he really is starting to look slow. Curry had to do it all by himself. And, Curry looked really good. They still held him to below his average in 3-point shooting. But I think that was because he had to shoot so many contested shots, and he still shot 34%. But yeah, things are not on the upswing for the Warriors right now.
That's sad. Giannis shot 27.5% from three.
So, and Giannis is maybe the best defensive player in the league, whereas Jordan Poole is right up there with Trae Young as the worst defensive player in the league.
That's sad. Let me tell you, the Warriors. You have to feel bad for him, Hillbilly.
Well, I do respect what they did, though. I mean, they tried to thread the needle. They tried to do this thing where handoff from one dynasty to another, and that is really hard to do. It didn't work, and they had 4 championships?
I know, only 4.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So, and they'll be back. But it was interesting to see Bob Myers leaving today. That was a sad day for Golden State.
Yeah. So those are the 2 teams that the Lakers face in the early rounds. Let's go over to the other team in the Western Conference, though, the Nuggets, who really took care of the Timberwolves. I believe it was the gentleman's sweep, the 4-1.
Yeah.
That was kind of, pretty easy. And then the Suns, who, remember back at the trade deadline, we were talking about, they got Kevin Durant, of course, and we're like, oh my gosh, this team with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul. And it's pretty disappointing to see him go out in the second round, and you really didn't think that they had a chance in that series.
No, I don't think they did have a chance, but I'm not really surprised. I wasn't really surprised by either one of those. I mean, the Nuggets are a very solid, steady team. They've had that core together for years and years now. They know what they're doing. They have the ultimate, offensive kind of lubricant for the whole machine in Jokic, where it's so hard to shut him down. But, I think we got confirmation that this crazy experiment with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert is just not going to work. And I think they're probably going to have to move Towns this year, because I just don't, he was horrible out there. He was the negative 9.2 in his plus minus, which is about as bad as you're going to see in the playoffs. He can't play with Gobert. He can't stick to the outside. So everything's clogged up in the middle. But, it was just a poor showing for the Timberwolves, unfortunately. And then the Suns, I don't know. I mean, what did you expect to happen with the Suns?
Well, when they made the trade back then, I thought they were going to be one of the top contenders in the West. And then Durant only played a couple games. And coming into the series, I picked the Nuggets to win, obviously. So not much, but I don't know. They just didn't really feel like they ever had a chance.
Well, I think when, at the trade deadline, when they got Durant, one of the things that I think we talked about was they're not ready. Like a team like that needs another year to get guys around your core. And you just did not have anybody else around Durant and Booker to really help. Chris Paul did, what he consistently does every playoffs, and that's get hurt and whine about it.
Quit whining.
DeAndre Ayton, he had the unenviable task of trying to guard Jokic. And I think what we saw with Phoenix is going to be telling with the Miami series with Denver, because it's going to be interesting to see how they handle Jokic. The Suns tried single coverage on Jokic a lot with DeAndre Ayton, and Jokic responded with one of the best playoff series we've ever seen. I mean, he scored 34 and a half points per game on the most efficient shooting we have ever seen for somebody, at least in the modern era, for somebody scoring that high volume. Normally, volume shooters don't get anywhere near 60%. That's people standing in the dunker spot that can do that. He shot 59.4% from the field, almost 45% from 3-point, 45%. And we all saw some of the shots he was taking.
Yeah.
Whether it is a half court one or a falling backwards, not even looking at the rim. Like he has an incredibly soft touch, excellent free throw shooter too. He averaged a healthy triple double, 13.2 rebounds, 10.3 assists. That's, I think, what happens when you don't orient your entire defense around stopping Jokic. He will do that to you. And you can't, that's death. When somebody scores 34 and a half points on that kind of efficiency, it's almost impossible to overcome that. The Suns, on the other hand, like they just haven't had time to get players around them yet. I mean, the Nuggets had 6 players average double figures that series. The Suns only had 3. They had Booker and Durant, and DeAndre Ayton barely scored in double figures with 10.8 a game while he was getting his butt kicked all over the floor by Jokic. They really just didn't have anybody else that they could throw out there. But you give them another year, you let them use the exceptions to the salary cap that they'll be able to use, start to bring in some guys that are ring chasing to just fill out that roster a little bit. You've got probably the best 2-man team in the league, or at least right up there, with Durant and Booker. We'll see. I don't think we know yet who their coach is going to be, but we'll find out.
No, it looks like it's down to Doc Rivers, Frank Vogel, and Kevin Young as of Tuesday night. So we'll see. But I absolutely think they can. You look at just as an organization, the Suns, and they have the new owner who the first thing he did was made the Durant trade. So you're like, this is a guy who wants to win. What he's done with the television contract, or what he's tried to do. I definitely think they could build around those two and, definitely go and compete next year.
Yeah. I mean, the guy looks like he's willing to spend money. I mean, he seems a little active, which is sometimes not a good thing from a owner, being a former fan of the Washington football team. I had to suffer with an active owner who sucked.
On the money.
But yeah, I mean, he had a great opportunity that happened right when he bought the team to acquire Kevin Durant. It's not like he did anything extraordinary to make that happen. It kind of fell into his lap, but I mean, heck, that's a great omen to start on, is landing someone like Durant to pair with someone like Booker, who, Durant during that series, I thought did not look himself. I thought he was still recovering from the injury. He played okay, but Booker looked just phenomenal. He was guarded very, very well on that series, and he still looked just great. But I think the Suns, they're going to be back, and they're going to be a top contender next year.
All right. So then you get to the Western Conference Finals, and it's the Lakers and the Nuggets. The Nuggets, so they won their series with the Timberwolves 4-1. They won their series with the Suns 4-2. So you'd be like, oh, well, it's going to be a 7-game series. Turned out it wasn't, though, because LA put up some close games, absolutely. But Denver just did enough in the end. And I think Jokic was obviously the best player in that series, but it was because he had Jamal Murray with him, who has been on fire in these playoffs. And when you look at the Nuggets from last year compared to this year, and the addition of the guys around Jokic, like Murray and Porter Jr., and you can see why the Nuggets are in the finals, because Jamal Murray especially, but Michael Porter Jr. too, have been outstanding.
Yeah, Michael Porter Jr., his scoring's actually down a bit, but he has been playing fantastic defense, which is a massive triumph for Malone. I've been watching a lot of Nuggets basketball because of Jokic over the last several years, and things were not always good between Porter Jr. and their coach, Mike Malone. And there were a lot of times where I worried that Porter Jr. was going to ask for a trade out, just because they would have these blowups where he was trying to get Porter Jr. to play defense and calling him on it. And it has worked. Porter Jr. is now a good defender, which is scary because he's 6'10", and a small forward. Like, that's just such a massive advantage for them now. And he's still just shooting incredibly from behind the three. But, I think what really happened with that Lakers team or that Lakers series, we got a demonstration of, with the Suns, we've realized that you can't just single cover Jokic. You have to shade your entire defense towards him. And then when the Lakers do that, and they figure out a way to at least hassle Jokic into relatively inefficient numbers, they hit on that where they have either Hachimura or LeBron playing Jokic with Anthony Davis basically double teaming him the entire time. And Anthony Davis is in the very, very top group of interior defenders in the NBA. And while that managed to make Jokic slightly inconsistent, I think he still averaged triple-double.
Nice.
It let Murray just absolutely explode. He scored 32 and a half points per game. His shooting percentages for a guard, he shot 52.7% from the field, which is just crazy for a point guard. Over 40% from three, 95%. So he did that, or 95% from the free throw line. So he got that, 50, 40, 90 club that, a lot of statisticians look at. Just, really an incredible job by Murray. And that's what happens when the defense completely focuses on Jokic like that. And, the Nuggets, they had 5 players average over 40% from three because they were wide open because everybody was covering Jokic, and Jokic will get them the ball. I think that's about as good a defense set up to handle the Nuggets as we're going to see. And, the Lakers were game. They played really hard. I think LeBron played 47 minutes and 50 seconds of the last game that did not go into overtime. Mm-hmm. So he played all but 10 seconds of that game. But, at the end, he was spent, obviously. But just a really, really solid, impressive performance from the Nuggets.
Yeah. So assuming LeBron stays, which I think everybody's assuming. But what do you think about the future of the Lakers? Because LeBron is another year older. Anthony Davis managed to stay healthy throughout the playoffs. And it was kind of like we talk about with Miami with guys like Austin Reeves. You're like, you watch the playoffs and you're like, who is Austin Reeves? He's going off for the Lakers. Of course, if you watched the Lakers during the season, you wouldn't know who Austin Reeves is. But
but he was good. But the fact that he continued it off into the playoffs, that's that guy. Wow. What a find for the Lakers, for a team that, normally just does one stupid thing after another. They drafted very well with him.
So what do you think? I don't know. Next year, what's the trajectory of this team? Was this their last best chance to win a championship with this core?
I think it probably is, because I think they're going to do something stupid. If they played smart, I think that they could have another shot at it. But they're not. They're going to do something stupid. They're going to take a lot of these players that they got around the the trade deadline that really helped propel them, into this really remarkable run that they had. I mean, if you remember, we were talking earlier in the season about them being a lottery team.
Oh yeah.
And then, there they are in the conference finals. That's pretty remarkable. And it says a lot about LeBron James doing that, at 38 years old. But I think what they're probably going to do is to take those good players that they fell into at the trade deadline and pack them together in a nice little package for Kyrie Irving and just blow the team up again and get them right back into the same spot that they were with Russell Westbrook. It just didn't work. And I'm afraid they're going to do something stupid like that.
Get ready.
Plus, I mean, one of the things that's been enjoyable about these playoffs is that people have been relatively healthy. Like and this is obviously a dyed in the wool Giannis fan saying this. So it sucked what happened to Giannis. But generally speaking, I mean, Embiid basically made it through the playoffs healthy, which doesn't really happen. Anthony Davis did, which never happens. So that's been a nice kind of, trend in the playoffs here. But as far as the Lakers go, like, can you count on that happening again next year? I know LeBron has been whining about his foot for the last couple of months. And even despite seeing the LeBron James of foot doctors, just couldn't get it fixed. But, those things are just going to happen to him probably every year now. And Anthony Davis going through the playoffs healthy, I don't know that you can count on that happening again. I think this was really their best shot, and they took their best shot. They just ran up against a team that was too good.
Yeah, a team that's going to the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history, Hillbilly. I got a quick little game for you because it's the first time the Nuggets are in the finals ever, 40-something years as a franchise. There's only 5 active franchises that have never made the NBA Finals. Can you name all 5?
Good question.
That have never made the NBA Finals?
Mm-hmm.
The Timberwolves.
Yes.
The Grizzlies.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think here for a second.
A few moments later.
The Hawks?
No.
They did. Okay. Clippers?
Yes.
The Pacers?
No.
They have.
One in the East, one in the West.
Oh, the whatever it is in Charlotte. Yes. Whether you want to call them the Hornets, the Bobcats, whatever. I don't think anywhere in their history have they been successful.
Yeah. And then the team that's linked with them.
Oh, the Pelicans.
Yeah.
5
teams that had never made the finals, all of whom were founded after 1988, except for the Clippers, who have been a franchise for 53 years.
Yes, 53 rather moribund years, but I do think they're in better shape these days than they were. So.
Okay. After our little game there, let's go to the East and talk about the team that's going to face the Nuggets in a second, which are the Heat.
Good to know.
But first, the team that played them in the Eastern Conference Finals were the Celtics. Celtics started off their playoffs against the Hawks, and they had a bit of trouble with the Hawks, who were the 7th seed. And I think we kind of dismissed it at the time, but maybe we shouldn't have.
Yeah, it was that demonstration of the Celtics' inconsistency that just drives Celtic fans insane. The Hawks were a 500 team. The Celtics should have just swept them immediately. They should, players like Jason Tatum should play Trae Young right off the court in the playoffs. Like, he should be hunting him over and over and over again and just running him ragged. And they just didn't really have that. They wound up bludgeoning them to death and winning by sheer talent. But 4-2 is not really the best record on a 2-7 series like that, 2nd seed versus a 7th seed. Mm-hmm. They should have been doing better than that. And I think it was kind of a sign of things to come.
Then you get to the 76ers series, and obviously they're playing the MVP of the league, but they go down 3-2 in that series, and they have to win a game in Philadelphia, which they do, and then they have to win another game 7.
And it was like, that's a series that I think on paper looks better than it was watching it. I don't know about you, but I did not really enjoy watching that series that much. I didn't think either team was really playing very good basketball, but
No, well, I think when you look at it in context with all the other series that were going on, I think Warriors Lakers kind of took up all the energy of that round. And so the Heat and the Knicks I thought was a compelling series, but the basketball wasn't. It was kind of, we talked about it was reminiscent of what you'd see 20 years ago, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I think that those two series kind of took away from the Sixers and the Celtics. Also the fact that Game 7 was a blowout. So
yeah, Tatum didn't really have the best series. He was fine, but he wasn't outstanding. Embiid was horrible, which was really sad to see, but he had an awful series. Horford really deserves a lot of credit for what happened with Embiid.
yeah.
He really had a great series defensively. But, we have the newly minted MVP, the player that is, at least by the vote count, clearly better than Nikola Jokic. And instead, he goes out and he scores, it's 25 points per game on bad efficiency, 42% for a center. Field goal percentage is not good. 20% from the 3-point line. I mean, Giannis looks like Steph Curry compared to him. I hate that we use Giannis as the metric for bad shooting, but I think it's unfortunately deserved.
Whoops.
But Embiid was awful. I mean, he just had a horrible series. As a team, Philly is a team that should be shooting very well from 3-point percentage. You've got James Harden, one of the best shooters ever. You've got Tyrese Maxey, one of the very best young shooters in the league. He's always right around the top percentage. You've got a center that can typically hit the three. And as a team, they only made a third of their threes, 33.3%. Just uninspired basketball. I really was not surprised that Doc Rivers got canned immediately afterwards.
Oh.
I didn't really find it to be inspired basketball, unfortunately.
Well, they traded in a doc for a nurse.
Wow.
They did, which I think is trading up. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I mean, they've definitely got the talent and the MVP.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what in the world Harden's going to do next year. And, we talked about counting on certain players to remain healthy. This was your year with Embiid and Harden, and they didn't get it done. I don't know that you're going to get that again, or at least you can't count on it happening every year. And if Harden goes to Houston, which doesn't make any sense on any planet, it's the craziest thing in the world. It's the last thing on earth Houston needs is James Harden coming to just teach all the young kids where the strip clubs are and how not to play defense.
That's right. That's right.
Like and they were a mess last year, but that is just going to doom Houston to mediocrity. But, they're not going to have him on the Sixers. I don't know. I don't know how good a shape they're going to be in, but I think Nurse is a great coach though. So.
Yeah. Well, those are the Celtics. Those are the first two rounds. Then they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Oh my gosh, we're going to talk about that series. Then let's get to the team that is making the NBA Finals, the Miami Heat. We can kind of skim through this, Hillbilly, because I know you're still. It's emotional.
This is true.
Well, except that the Heat just deserve a massive amount of credit for that, because they caught the Bucks feeling sorry for themselves, and they just brutally murdered them in public. I mean, it was just absolutely no sympathy at all for the Bucks losing Giannis, and the Bucks were playing like they expected sympathy. It was a horrible defensive game or defensive series. I mean, the Bucks came in, I think, pretty much like them and the Cavaliers were always tossing 1 and 2, but I think most people thought that the Bucks probably had the best defense, and they were going up against one of the worst offenses in the Heat. At least the regular season Heat. And they allowed 124 points a game, which is just stratospheric. their defense completely collapsed. I think they just felt sorry for themselves. I don't think Budenholzer was capable of changing anything to adjust. Like once Giannis was out, it was just kind of like, well, I'm out of ideas. Like that was kind of my idea. I was going to let Giannis kick everybody's butt. You know? And then when that didn't happen, they just completely fell apart, and the Heat just totally took advantage of the situation, as they should, and really showed a lot of just they wanted it so much more. And Jimmy Butler started showing playoff Jimmy again.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I'll give Budenholzer some slack because he was going through some major family issues during that series. But as we know, that's his lack of adjusting was not solely in that series. So they fired him. And I wanted to get your thoughts on their new coach, the former Raptors assistant, Adrian Griffin.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it's really tough to tell with assistant coaches unless you really have some kind of connection with the team. You know, he was an assistant coach in Toronto under Nick Nurse. I feel like the Bucks could have had Nurse if they had wanted him, and they chose his assistant instead, which is kind of interesting. But, you know, part of the process was Giannis meeting with the coach to see how he liked him, because obviously the Bucks have to make Giannis very happy.
Yay!
Which I don't think that's such a great idea, because I don't know how qualified Giannis is to pick a head coach. But, you know, that's what they do. So, you know, hopefully he's really good.
Yeah.
It's just tough to see.
Well, at least according to Woj, in this ESPN article, Nurse was one of 3 finalists, and the other was Kenny Atkinson, has been a head coach. He's with the Warriors right now.
Yeah.
But that is interesting because Nurse was fired, obviously, and so they take his assistant instead, when they probably could have had Nurse.
I think they probably could have. And I really was hoping they would get Nurse. I think, and we're going to get into this in a little bit with the Celtics, but I think that, one of the things that happened is they took a team that was primed and ready to win a championship, and they put a brand new rookie head coach in charge of it. And I don't understand why that's a good idea. I know sometimes it works, but I don't know. It just seems like not the best idea in the world.
We'll talk about them, the Celtics. But then we got the Heat and the Knicks. And as I said, that was kind of reminiscent of a bygone era in the league of not as much scoring, because the Heat, as you note, only shot 42.5% from the field, but they really handled the Knicks. They won game 1. They lost game 2 because Jimmy Butler didn't play, but I feel like even when the series was 1-1, it looked like Miami was just in control.
Yeah, they figured out how to slow down Brunson enough, and I think that was just kind of all they really needed to do. And I don't think the Heat had a particularly great series, but they win the plays that matter. Like they are collectively smart enough to know like when you have to win, like, you know, which plays you really have to put all the effort into, and it works.
So I just want to move past that because we got to talk about this Eastern Conference Finals series. I mean, listen, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs were amazing. And I think the NBA, with the ratings and the viewership, like at decades long highs, the NBA was feeling pretty good about themselves. And then we get to the conference finals and both series are at 3-0. And we're looking at, for the first time ever, both series being sweeps. And I think the NBA was nervous a little bit. And the Nuggets didn't help them, but the Celtics did. The Heat were up 3-0 in the series, and the Celtics won 3 straight. Just the 4th team ever to do that. And they were looking to become the first team ever to win a series in the NBA after they were down 3-0. And then Monday night happens, Game 7, Memorial Day, by the way.
America!
But, I don't know. How would you describe that series, Hillbilly? Because it wasn't looking good, and then games 4 through 7 happened, and yeah,
it was pretty unbelievable. I mean, it just I didn't think the Celtics had it in them. Give them credit for getting back into it. But and this is, I'm sorry to offend your newfound Heat sensibilities, but the Celtics are a vastly more physically talented team than the Heat.
Please.
I mean, they should just run them right off the floor, but that's not everything, and to quote Charles Barkley, like during the halftime of that last game, like, I am sick of watching those stupid Celtics. I think he called them stupid like 5 times because they don't do anything. They don't run any plays. They just dribble the ball up and shoot a contested 3 over and over. And they don't run screens. They don't run anything. I mean, at one point, I don't know if you saw this, but Jaylen Brown, who was in the midst of one of the worst series ever, he had his shot blocked by Duncan Robinson.
I did see that.
A 3-pointer. He had a 3-pointer blocked by Duncan Robinson, who is a defensive liability.
Yes.
It's like they just didn't care, or they were just so exhausted because of that, Sixers series that they had.
Even in the first half of that game 7, they went 0 for 10 for 3.
0 for 12. They started 0 for 12.
They just kept shooting it. And it's like, you're not making anything.
Well, because, you get the presser afterwards with Missoula just saying, well, we just didn't make the shots. It's like that. It's all it is. Like it's a make or miss league, and that's all it is. Which kind of begs the question, like, well, what do they need him for then? If his whole strategy is to just let them dribble up and shoot a 3, like, you don't need a coach. Don't pay him. Give me the money.
Get that dough.
If I was a Celtics fan, why not? But I'm still pissed at Joe Mazzulla. Like, his one-word answers in the between quarters and his little quips during the press conferences. Like, you're not Greg Popovich. You haven't done anything.
No. It's like, I think he believes that he has figured out that it's just a math problem. You just get up more threes and you will win. But, having an actual flow to your offense, having players stepping into good looks on threes that the whole team feels good about because they work to make them happen. Those are things that can bump up your 3-point percentage. The Celtics, this game 6 and game 7 were the 2 worst shooting percentages that the Celtics had all year. They were the worst and the second worst. They had those back to back in the playoffs. That is not a coincidence. It's not just because, as Joe Mazzulla said, they were just missing the shots. It's because the Heat had completely figured out what they were doing. Not that it was difficult. The Heat figured out all we have to do is play a relatively simple zone, and the Celtics have no chance of figuring it out. Absolutely no chance.
They showed that graphic during Game 7 where the Heat, when they were playing zone and defense, and the numbers were great for the Heat defensively. Yeah, and it just goes to show. And, like, it's easy to pile on Mazzulla because I think he just made mistake after mistake after mistake. Like, when you realize that you are not shooting, you need to switch. He needed to get Robert and Grant Williams out there more. And if it's going to be an ugly game, then let me get my players that can just brutalize you out there, like Grant and Robert Williams. Instead, he just kept throwing it out there over and over and over again, the same thing. And, I think it reflects in the attitudes that the players have, and how you have Jaylen Brown just having an unbelievably awful series. In game 7, he made 8 field goals and he had 8 turnovers.
Fact nugget.
Like, that should not happen from your second best player. That's incredible. Over the course of the series, he shot 16.3% from the 3-point line. It's like we've had a descending order of suckiness as we've talked about the 3-point shooting and problems the teams have had, and how bad 25% was for Poole, and how bad 20% was for Embiid. And here you have Jaylen Brown just laughing at those numbers. I can do so much worse than that. 16%. That is, Giannis shoots almost twice as good as that. I mean, it's incredible to see it happen. He just completely lost confidence. I know he had hurt his hand earlier. I wonder if that had something to do with it. But just, they did not look ready to go at all. And it's the frustration on the part of Boston fans has to be exacerbated by the fact that Jimmy Butler looked like he was pretty much spent in the last several games. He really didn't look like he had his legs under him anymore. He was really picking his spots more, but they could not take advantage of it.
Yeah, and they were lucky to win that game 6. I mean,
they were as lucky as you can possibly get. Like, if you watch, and obviously we're talking about the Derek White tip in, which was, I didn't even notice it happen when it happened. I don't know if you, as soon as the ball clanked off, I thought it was over. And Derek White, like, if you watch the replays of that tip in that White had, first of all, White was supposed to be up in the corner to be basically stretching the defense. Like, he's probably not going to get the ball. He's just stretching the defense up in the corner, but he just slithers in perfectly, gets right in the right spot for the putback on, I think it was, who shot the 3? It was
Smart, I think.
Smart. It was Marcus Smart, because the Heat did a very good job of denying Tatum and Brown. So that's why it went to Smart, and he misses. And White got, if you watch the replay, if that ball had bounced in any other direction, the game is over. It just bounced right to him, right in the right spot. It was incredible to see it. But, the fact that the Celtics were in that spot was just not good. And I think the Heat knew going into game 7 that they had them.
Yeah. Because, the Heat, they had a bad game 6 too. Like, it was kind of an ugly game. Yeah. But at the end, and Jimmy Butler obviously did not play well, and he didn't shoot from the free throw line well. But you go back the play before, Jimmy Butler gets fouled by Horford, I believe, and he's shooting. And originally they call it 2, and so he would go to the line for 2. But I believe Boston challenged it, and so they looked at it, and it was clearly a foul. And they looked and they saw, his feet are behind the line. So it was a 3. So Boston kind of screwed themselves there. Joe Mazzulla almost cost them the series right there.
They did. And, that wasn't the only result, though, that happened from that replay. Because while, they noticed that he was behind the 3-point line, so they did change it to 3 free throws, which, give Butler credit. He made those ones, all 3 of them. But they also looked at the clock when that happened. Yeah. And it was originally at 2.4 seconds, and they changed it to 3 seconds left, which normally might not matter that much. But as we just talked about, Derek White needed every single 100th of a second to make that happen. Yeah. It was just really wild how that happened. A really astonishing finish, especially when you consider that was to take it to game 7. Boston had done it. They had gone into Miami. They had pulled off a miracle there. They were going to be the first team out of 150 previous teams to come back from an 0-3 deficit. They were going to do it. It was so exciting. And then game 7 happened.
Well, when I think of the end of game 6, I think a lot of people can look at the similarities of that with game 6 of the 2013 finals with the Heat and the Spurs, because you remember that finals. Yeah,
the Ray Allen shot.
Yeah, 3-2. LeBron's 3 won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen, his 3-pointer.
James catches, puts up the 3. Won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His 3-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
Yeah.
And the Heat ends up winning that game in overtime.
Except that the Spurs played well in game 7. They didn't win, but they did make a game of it.
That's what I was going to say, because the Spurs, the crushing defeat in game 6. But a lot of people don't remember that game 7 was a really good game.
Yeah.
But that was a really good game. And so that's why I didn't think Miami was going to win. But I thought, just thinking back to last year and Jimmy Butler's press conference, because remember, this was the same matchup last year.
So we had enough. Next year, we will have enough, and we're going to be right back in the same situation, and we're going to get it done.
And Game 7 was in Miami, and if Jimmy Butler makes that 3, they go to the finals instead of the Celtics. Right. That's why I thought the horrible free throw shooting game he had, Game 6, he wasn't going to miss any of those 3 free throws.
Nope.
And so I kind of,
well, and that's, you know what, though, that is Jimmy Butler. Like when he stepped up for those 3 free throws, did you have any doubt that he was going to make all 3? I mean, he's going to make them all. Mm-hmm. Like he doesn't look even a little bit nervous, like he's just completely calm and cool and in the moment. And just, Jimmy Butler is, there's a lot of talk about Caleb Martin getting the MVP of the series.
I should have. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, except that Jimmy Butler is what makes that team go. Like
That's true.
If it wasn't for Jimmy Butler, but Caleb Martin, what a find. He's a super important player for them now.
Yeah, well, he averaged 14 points in the playoffs, but he had 19 points per game in the conference finals, 26 in Game 7, and he scored 135 points in that series, which is the most in the last 2 rounds of the playoffs by an undrafted player in the modern draft era.
That's a fact.
And this is after scoring, 9 points a game in the regular season? Yeah. I don't even know if it was that much.
Like we talk about, with the Lakers, and we said we talk about the Heat with these gems. And the Heat, they just bring these guys out, and we have no clue who they are, and they look like, they just look insane.
Well, somehow they get them all to play like they are afraid they're going to be fired tomorrow. And they are just all going all out. Like you look at Gabe Vincent, who, has had a great playoffs, their point guard. If he's probably undrafted or second round, maybe. And, he's playing on that ankle. I don't know if there was the one play where his shoe fell off.
Yeah.
And you saw the apparatus that he has on that ankle. Like he can't move it that much. And it's got to hurt like hell, but he's out there just playing. I thought it was fantastic when he picks up his shoe and he's holding it and he knocks the ball out with his shoe. And I guess they called that a foul, but I don't know what the rule is on that. It was really wild to see. But like that was the effort. Like he's like, okay, my shoe's off. Well, you know what? I'm going to use my shoe then. Like that's the energy and the attitude that the Heat brought into the game. Again, just winning when it matters, like, knowing which plays you have to make and just at those times going all out and just getting the job done.
Oh, I just love it, Hillbilly. I mean, oh my gosh. I was so happy last night.
It's a good time to be a Heat fan. And I don't know where the Celtics go from here. It's going to be an interesting off season for them. They've got a huge decision to make with Jaylen Brown. I don't think it's really a decision, but they're probably going to have to offer him the Supermax, which with the new collective bargaining agreement, it's going to tie him up. They're probably going to have to shed some other players. And then, what did they do with Joe Mazzulla? Like, I personally think they need to fire him. I respect him coming back and making it to a conference finals in his first year, but I think hiring him in the first place was a mistake. I think it's really more on Brad Stevens, their general manager, than it is on Joe Mazzulla. I mean, Joe Mazzulla, we talked earlier with the Bucks picking Adrian Griffin and how that's kind of risky with an assistant coach. We've never seen him be a head coach before. Mazzulla was that to the nth degree. If you watch an NBA sideline, you have all the players sitting there, and then you usually have about 3 assistant coaches. Last year, for the Celtics, you would have had Ime Udoka, Will Hardy, and Damon Stoudemire out there. They were their 3 frontline guys, their first row guys. Joe Mazzulla was not even on that front row. He was in the back row, like not even sitting with the players. Like that's the bump that he got, and the fact that he wasn't really up for it. Like I think Bill Simmons' father calls him second row Joe because that's just Like they just plucked them from the audience almost, and that's a really hard thing to do with a team that, a young team just coming into, their prime. It's just tough, but I don't think you can keep making that mistake. I think you have to get a veteran coach in there to whip that team into shape.
Yeah. Well, they would have liked Will Hardy. I mean, I thought that was the guy, but he left for Utah, right?
Yeah, before
reunited with Danny Ainge.
I mean, and I shouldn't be too hard on Brad Stevens because the timing of it just couldn't have been worse for the Celtics. I mean, they lose Udoka right before the season starts. If they had found out this stuff about Udoka, whatever it is, before Will Hardy had left, they could have kept Will Hardy, and I think they would have won the championship this year.
Bold move there.
But because we've seen what that guy can do for the Jazz. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess.
I don't know. Let's not talk about it anymore because we got to talk about teams that are actually still playing, Hillbilly. That would be the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. Let's go to the NBA Finals prediction and talk about this matchup a little bit and make our picks because Miami was nobody expected them to be here. The 8th seed. Denver, I don't know if you remember, Hillbilly, but I believe a couple people picked Denver to make the finals on this podcast.
Yes,
if I can think back 2 months.
I believe we were 100% on that. Both of us.
Xander warned you.
Yeah, the team for the East said forget about that. But for the West.
Well, it's difficult to predict that the number 8 seed is going to make it to the finals. Particularly, if I'm remembering right, I think we made that pick after the play-in games. I can't remember.
No, we didn't.
We didn't? Okay. But remember, the Heat lost their first play-in game.
And they were 4 minutes away from losing their second one, too.
Right. I mean, there's no way anybody could have seen this coming. So not even you and I. So
no, the people filled with facts couldn't have even. So, but we did see what was coming out of the West, and it was that Nuggets team. And you see why we picked them because they basically ran through the West, and they had, they are going to have 10 days of rest in between their last game against the Lakers and Thursday night, which is the first game of the finals. And there's only 3 teams who have ever had 10 games of rest in between the conference finals and the finals. That would be the 2013 Spurs, the 2017 Warriors, and the 2019 Warriors. Now, the Spurs and the 2017 Warriors won their first game. 2019 Warriors lost their first game. Remember, that was the Raptors series and the injuries that the Warriors were facing. So you can kind of, take a look at that. But there's kind of like this thing around a lot of rest in all sports. And when you're like, well, this team, and in this case, it's the Heat, they've been playing. They're in a rhythm. They are ready to go. The Nuggets haven't been. They might be rusty. But the stats say that doesn't hold up, that the Nuggets aren't going to be rusty.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if they start off a little slow, but I think the rest thing really is more important with that. Another thing that's been popping up is the last 10 times a team has had more than a week off, and they were at home for the first game. They're 9-1.
This is true.
So they've won 9, lost. They only lost once,
and that exception,
any team, and then that exception had Michael Jordan.
Yeah, so
which is basically means 9-0 because you cannot count when Michael Jordan was on the other team.
But Hillbilly, Jimmy Butler is Michael Jordan's son.
Well, I mean, as much as I love Jimmy Butler and respect the hell out of him, he is not Michael Jordan. But a great player anyways. But, I think in this case, it's so exacerbated too. I mean, the amount of sheer exhaustion that Miami, has put them through now. Like that is a really tough series for them to get through. Boston took them to the very limit.
it didn't look like it was going to be, because you remember that game 3, Boston gave up in game 3.
Yep.
And you thought, both of these series are going to be sweeps and we're going to have 10 days between the conference finals and the finals, which would have sucked. But instead we get that, and it helps the Nuggets. And you got to think that the Heat are really tired, and it might not help them so much that they played 7 games.
And, you put all that, and then you remember that they're playing in Denver with the altitude, where, that's a home court extra advantage there anyways, because the altitude means less oxygen, which means you get tired faster. So you're going to, add that onto the already the sizable fatigue that Miami has, and it's a recipe for trouble. But hopefully Miami has the right attitude and they can muscle through it, but it's going to make it harder.
Yeah, and you're also facing the 2-time MVP, who now we look back on it and are like, well, maybe he should have been the MVP again, who was the only player in the playoffs who was top 5 in the league in points, rebounds, and assists. He's averaging a triple-double in the playoffs. Last time that happened was actually Russell Westbrook, but he did it for the Wizards. But he has the most triple-doubles in a single postseason, 8.
That's a lot of facts.
And
he's not done.
We still got a round to go. It's just insane. But you talk about Jokic, and they've had Jokic, and he's stayed healthy. But as we mentioned, the guys around Jokic, and when we talk about how this matchup is going to go, talk about that too, because Miami, or I was reading something, and it, about how Miami is going to cover Jokic, and it's like, you can't stop Jokic. You have to stop the other guys. What the Suns and the Lakers and the Timberwolves failed to do was stop Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, even Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, guys like these.
Yeah.
Because Jokic is going to score, even if Jokic scores 40 points, that could be fine for Miami if they can at least contain everybody else. If Jokic scores like 25 points and he, gets double-digit assists because he's dealing it out and Miami can't stop the other players, then that might even be worse than just letting Jokic go off.
But that's the problem that Denver presents you. Like, as we talked about with the series, look at what happened when the Suns tried that. When they tried to say, okay, well, we're just going to try to contain everybody else, and just Jokic can't just beat us by himself. But when you have somebody scoring like 35 points a game or up to 40 points a game on 60% field goal percentage, you can't come back from that. That's such a massive problem mathematically to overcome. I think the Lakers were better about that. I think they took the smarter approach and they tackled Jokic. And, then because, maybe Jamal Murray won't go crazy. But the problem is that it just leaves so many other players open, and Jokic is the best player maybe ever at getting those open players the ball. I mean, he passes like John Stockton, but he's 7 feet tall. So he can just pass it over everybody. And the Heat aren't really equipped from a personnel standpoint to do what the Lakers did. I mean, they have Bam Adebayo, who's about as good as it gets defensively, except that he's undersized. He's only 6'9".
Mm-hmm.
After him, you don't have another interior defender on that.
Oh, what are you talking about? Cody Zeller, please.
Okay, Cody Zeller. Is he still on the Heat?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, they don't, and Kevin Love has been banished to the bench, but you can't put Kevin Love up there against Jokic. The Heat are going to be forced to hope that Bam Adebayo can somehow do this against Jokic by himself. And I don't think that's going to happen with that size disparity. I'm worried that Adebayo is going to get into foul trouble pretty quickly. And if Adebayo gets into foul trouble, Jokic is going to score 100 points because there's nobody else to get in his way. and that's just a massive problem for them. And if they just overcommit to him, I mean, Jamal Murray is you talk about playoff Jimmy, playoff Murray is a thing as well. I mean, he has taken it up a whole nother level as it's just like it was in the bubble the last time he was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
He just, in the playoffs, he cannot be stopped.
Even just looking at the other side of the ball, when you're talking about Bam Adebayo, watching Game 7, even Game 7, and the shots he was taking, he scored 12 points. He scored 11 points in Game 6. It was kind of frustrating to watch him at times in those games. He shot 40% from the field.
And he would pass up shots too. Just like, I mean, he had a play in Game 7 where I forget who it was, but they flopped on him and it's just wide open. And then he just passes it, which is the worst thing you can do against a good defense. Because if you get a wide open against a good defense, that means everybody else is really well covered. Mm-hmm. So to pass out of that means you're necessarily passing it to a well-covered player. And it's just, I don't know, Adebayo has been shy about shooting, and that's a problem.
It just doesn't seem as confident. And when you look at Jimmy Butler, really, because in Game 6 and the games previously, Boston had kind of figured him out with the shot fake, and he got rid of that in Game 7. And he didn't really have that great of a game in Game 7 compared to what he's had previously, but it kind of worked, getting rid of the shot fake in Game 7 against the defense. And so you talk about the best coach in the league, probably, in Eric Spoelstra. And so you have to hope that he can figure out something for Adebayo on offense, because you need him out there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And Spoelstra is, I think, probably the best coach coaching right now. Now, he's going up against a much better coach than he has been throughout the playoffs so far. Mm-hmm. Like, Mike Malone is a really good coach that has had a lot of time to coach this core team up. But Spoelstra's on a different level, I think. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, if you were to take the Boston Celtics roster and have Spoelstra coach it versus second row Joe coaching the Heat,
rude.
The Celtics would have swept them. I mean, it would have been an absolute massacre. I mean, at least maybe I'm overblowing it, but I really do think the Spoelstra is amazing. And I think what he's going to do is what I think he has to do. Like, as you were pointing out, Adebayo's problem is offensively. He can really, he not aggressive enough, not shooting well, but he's a really good facilitator in the offense. And I think what they really need to have him, playing up, more towards the top of the key. They need to try some like inverse pick and rolls where he's the guy that's getting the screen set for him by a guard, because that's going to pull Jokic out into a different spot than he's used to. And you can trust Adebayo. Like if you had Jimmy Butler setting a screen for Adebayo, that's a really tough look for a team, because Adebayo is really good at passing out of that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to put Jokic in a bad spot. I think you're going to see Spoelstra do like smart things like that because he's just that good of a coach. I don't know that it's going to be able to cover up for the deficiencies. And, I think one of the things that we saw that looked so good throughout these playoffs is that zone that they've been playing. And, the fact that the Celtics just look stupefied by a simple zone. Unfortunately for the Heat, though, according to Second Spectrum stats, the Nuggets are the second best team in the league against the zone.
It's the truth.
Because Jokic will just slice it to ribbons. He knows exactly how to handle that problem. Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's really going to be tough. I think everything is so pointing towards the Nuggets having like every advantage. I mean, you look at how limited a lot of the players on the Heat are, with getting their own shot. Jimmy Butler really has to make that go. Well, the Nuggets just so happen to have a defender who just got done doing a very good job against LeBron James, did a wonderful job against Kevin Durant and Aaron Gordon, who is bigger than Jimmy Butler probably faster, not as good at basketball, but, a hell of a defender. It's just what they need to just sick on an already exhausted Jimmy Butler. I guess the hope is getting Tyler Hero back, which is they're saying a possibility that he'll come back at some point, because they really need some players that can do more than just a catch and shoot three. That can, what they kind of need is to take advantage of Jokic and his, very slow footedness. And they need to get him playing up on those switches. So like on a pick and roll, Jokic, you get switched onto Jokic. You need to have someone that Jokic is going to have to respect their ability to shoot the three off the dribble. And they don't have anybody on the Heat that's really good at that except for Tyler Hero, who could do that and then maybe expose Jokic. But I also worry about that for them, because more minutes for him probably means less minutes for players like Caleb Martin and Max Strus. And Tyler Hero is a defensive liability. He's really bad defensively. And those other players for the Heat aren't. And if I worry that they're going to mess up this formula for success that they've had when Hero comes back in and doesn't have the same defensive mentality. So in a way, I almost look at that as being a problem for the Heat.
Ooh. Feels like everything is pointing the Nuggets' way, Hillbilly, like you just said.
It does, which almost makes it harder to pick the Nuggets.
Because you look at before the Eastern Conference Finals, ESPN Analytics gave the Celtics a 97% chance to win the series. The Heat were up 3-0 in the series, and ESPN was still like, oh, it's 50-50, which, go back to Game 7, everybody's like, ooh. And then Game 6 happens, and Boston somehow wins that game, and everybody thinks that, oh, Miami is... No, everything's pointed against them. But you know what? They won. And so, I don't know. Let's get into our predictions here, Hillbilly, because I think, obviously, back, a month and a half ago, I chose the Nuggets to win the NBA Finals. So, I don't know if I can go against that, even though my team is playing. But I'm just going to give you some stats here to back up my decision, because I am picking the Nuggets to win the series.
If you say so.
Miami is 1-9 in their last 10 games against Denver. Their only win was in the bubble.
It was the first game of the bubble, too.
Yeah.
It was the very first game.
And by the way, a little off track here, but we talk about the bubble kind of like this, one-off, whatever, doesn't really matter. But we had the same conference finals this year as we did in the bubble. So maybe in the bubble, we just kind of had like the best basketball because there were no other distractions.
Maybe.
Guaranteed.
The last time Miami won in Denver was when Barack Obama was president in November 2016. That's absolutely insane to me. 7 years ago, almost.
Denver's really good at home.
It's true.
Wow. Miami their plus or minus was minus 0.3 this season. In the regular season, they averaged 109.5 points per game. They gave up 109.8. They're averaging, I believe, about 5 points more per game in the postseason, but they're the first team to make the finals with a negative plus minus since at least 1971.
Dash facts.
Have to take that into account. I don't know. I got the Nuggets, and I'll say Miami will win games 3 and 4 at home, because I think those are the only games they can win. So I've got Nuggets in 6. What say you, Hillbilly?
I mean, I'm going to go with what I think the logical choice is here. Everything favors the Nuggets. Something else of players that have guarded Jimmy Butler for at least 100 possessions. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but Aaron Gordon is far and away the best defender in the league against Jimmy Butler. He shuts him down because he's so physically capable of keeping up with them. And it's just like another thing that is just pointing right at the Nuggets. Like they just have every advantage. So I'm going to pick the Nuggets in 5. Because I think that the Heat are going to be so tired. They're going to have games where they can't really compete. I don't think they're going to be able to shut down the Nuggets offensive machine. They're not going to be able to do to the Nuggets what they did to the Celtics, where they just kind of muddied everything up. I think Jokic can just keep it moving. And so when the Heat have those offensive lapses that they have, where they really need to hope that their defense can hold them, it's going to be a really tall order against the Nuggets to make that happen. But with all the things that we have talked about, all that might just turn out to only be fuel for Jimmy Butler's fire to piss him off even more and to make him even more angry and just more motivated to do something incredible. And I'm going to pick the Nuggets because it's a logical thing to do. And as much as I love Jokic, and I've been a huge fan of the Nuggets because I love the way they run their organization, I wouldn't mind seeing the Heat do it because it would be so incredible for them to get to do that. I mean, they would have gone through the number one team in the East in the Bucks, who they just humiliated, then the number two team in the Celtics, and then the number one team in the West. And just being the 8th seed,
Yeah,
it just really would be something.
The 3 teams with the best records this year.
Yeah.
The 8th seed, they're only the second 8 seeds to ever make the finals. That was the Knicks back in 1999. Knicks didn't win that series, though. And so Miami could do something that no one's ever done and win an 8th seed. And when you also look about it, they didn't have the play-in back then. Miami also had to play 2 play-in games.
And they lost one of them.
Yeah.
They had to
play 2 because they lost one.
And they almost lost to the Bulls.
Yeah. Oh.
Which is just inexcusable.
It's insane to think about right now, 2 months ago. But, yeah. I saw somewhere online that someone thought that a sweep by Denver would probably be more likely than a Heat win. And on paper it would, but in reality, I don't think so. First off, I would love to see Miami win, but I don't think they will. Now, I didn't think they'd beat the Bucks or the Celtics, so I think they absolutely could. It would not shock me at all because of everything that's happened. Like on paper, and you look at the numbers and the stats and the facts and all this stuff, and you're just like, there's no chance. No chance. But in reality, they do have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, what were we saying, about the Heat versus the Bucks before? Like, they didn't have a chance. I mean, they weren't going to, even when Giannis was hurt, it was still the idea like, well, I mean, okay, they still have a better team, even without Giannis. That was completely wrong. I wouldn't have given them any chance against the Celtics if anybody had asked me. Like, I didn't think they could win that series, but there it is. So here I am saying the same thing with the Nuggets. They don't have any chance. And, I don't know when we'll learn, except that, it does things to kind of regress to the mean, and statistically, like this kind of aberrational behavior eventually stops.
Yeah.
I mean, the Heat were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the regular season. And then all of a sudden they turn into the best. And I don't know, like we'll see. I think it'll be great for me because I love the Nuggets. I would love it if they won. I would love it if Jokic, just all the detractors, just, you all can just go jump in a lake.
Dang.
Right.
I am the MVP. I am the best player on the planet, which I think pretty much everybody believes that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even I, a Giannis apologist, have to admit I'd take Jokic over Giannis now. It would be fantastic to see, but if they lose, it would be about the biggest miracle we've seen in sports.
The fact that it's not it's not the NCAA tournament. It's not one-offs. It's a 7-game series. And the fact that Miami's done this is in 3 7-game series where they've been the lesser seed and haven't been favored. And now they're here. And if they could do it one more time.
It doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, for them, I I don't know if an 8 seed's ever won in any other major sports, but for that to happen in a best of 7 kind of setting, like you said, it's not March Madness where anything can happen in any particular game. You have to sustain the miracle. And that is, it's been a pleasure to watch. It has been a ton of fun.
Oh my
I
gosh.
have always been poisoned against the Heat because of the stupidity that was rampant during the Heatles time, where it was hard to live on the planet during that time.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
But I got to admit, I have a total convert. Like that mix of Pat Riley and Spoelstra running the show, like they all know who is in charge. They all know, like nobody thinks they can get Spoelstra fired. Pat Riley, has, I don't know if you have heard that story where somebody came to Pat Riley to complain about Spoelstra, and he went down into the locker room, lined all the players up against the wall like he's going to massacre them, and yelled at them like, don't anybody ever come to talk behind the coach's back to me again. Like, it just doesn't happen here.
Story time.
Like, that's the kind of power that you need to be as effective as Spoelstra is. So it's a pleasure to watch, and I hope they make a good series of it. I just feel like everything is pointing against them.
I hope so. I love it. Oh my gosh. Everybody wanting the Celtics and Lakers get out of here. Nuggets and Heat is going to be great, I think. You know what? It is. It's going to be fun to watch. That series, the NBA Finals, begins this Thursday, 8:30 Eastern tip-off. All the games on ABC.
Big game alert.
All the tip-offs are at 8:30 instead of 9 o'clock now, thank goodness.
Yep, loving that.
Except for the Sunday games, which tip off at 8. Game 7, if there is one, would be Sunday, June 18th, Hillbilly. And then we get to the offseason, which might be a little exciting. And it all starts with the NBA draft, Thursday, June 22nd, with Wembanyama officially going to the Spurs.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is amazing how official that already is. It's just like, I don't think, did you see the interviews during the lottery with them where they're not even, there is no pretending like, if you go to San Antonio, it's just flat out you're going to San Antonio, which seems rigged to me, but that's fine.
No, please, come on. Oh, it's going to be fun. Basketball. I'm excited, Hillbilly, not just because it's my team, but I think it's going to be good.
It's been a great playoffs. I'm excited for the finals. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. All right, so there you go. Our little NBA Finals preview, fact-filled NBA Finals preview here on the Zander's Facts podcast with, of course, our Zander's Facts senior NBA analyst, Hillbilly. Hillbilly, once again, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on again.
Zander's Facts.
Oh my goodness, y'all. Thanks once again to Hillbilly for coming on the podcast. That's all the facts I have for basketball. I know. I would love for the Miami Heat to win. I just don't know. Denver Nuggets. I think it's going to be a really good series, though. Lots of fun basketball in the next 2 weeks. But those are all the facts that I have for this week's edition of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. And remember that if you like the Zander's Facts podcast, if you think you're going to like all the facts on this week's edition, remember to follow this podcast, download this episode 107, rate and review the podcast. Then check us out on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at Zander's Facts. That is Zander with a Z. And most importantly, remember to tell all your friends. Spread the facts! Zander's Facts podcast. Tell all your friends about the podcast, about the newsletter, Zander's Weekend Facts, about Zander's Facts on YouTube. All our new episodes get published to YouTube with a nice background. Go watch, subscribe, do all that. And then check out the Zander's Facts link tree because it has all these Zander's Facts links that you need. Episode 107, that's a wrap. Episode 108 is coming up next week. It's a very special podcast because I'm warning you all now that 5 a.m. Wednesday morning, episode 108 will not be in your podcast feeds. I know, very sad, but we're recording episode 108 on Wednesday of next week because we are talking soccer, because it's the end of the club season in Europe. And we got a lot of other stuff to talk about in soccer too. So, we're bringing on our Xander's Facts soccer analyst, Emma Adams. She's coming back on the podcast next week to talk about everything soccer. And we're recording that podcast next Wednesday, which means it's going to be out next Thursday. So, Thursday, first week of June, Thursday, June 8th is when that podcast is going to come out, episode 108. Just to let you all know, because there are going to be facts next week. They're just coming a day later. I know, I'm sorry. But you know what? There's going to be a lot of them. So it's going to be well worth the wait. Episode 108, Soccer Podcast. Oh, it's going to be a good one. I got a lot of things to talk about, y'all.
Cool facts, bro.
Coming up next week on the podcast. But that is it. That is a wrap for episode 107 of the Zander's Facts podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see y'all with episode 108 next week.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6.